Thursday night's council meeting. And obviously we had a very unusual set of circumstances where we had to bring that to an adjourned halt because of the Deputy Mayor. So I've been in touch with him this morning. It's good to hear he's back at home, resting well. And he's asked me this evening to pass on this message, to thank everybody who was involved in Thursday night to make him as safe and secure as he could be. A special thank you in particular to Councillor Douglas Hammond-Dichet and TAF, our mayoral officer, for their swift actions alongside the Chief Executive and the Mayor for the practical management of the night, and all council colleagues who were there on Thursday. He's also very grateful for everyone who supported last Thursday, including the two fantastic paramedics who attended St George's Centre and obviously made sure he got the support needed. And a thank you to all those who have sent through messages of support over the last few days. And on behalf of the whole Cabinet, we wish the Deputy Mayor well as he continues his recuperation. He's back at home, which is always a positive thing to see. The other thing I wanted to update Cabinet colleagues on since we last met, there was an article published on the Guardian newspaper over the weekend, which I think all of us are aware of. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a clear understanding of my response to that. I wrote to the leader of Kent County Council, Lyndon Camcaran, on Sunday, and I just want to highlight in particular to colleagues the areas which I asked for some urgent clarification on. So on the issue of local government reorganisation, the article reports that Lyndon Camcaran said, in a way, this is the cleverest way to put a spoke in the works, but still be part of the process. That is substantially different to the position given to myself and other Kent leaders in a letter sent on the 10th of September after the recording of the meeting, which says KCC will continue to act in good faith through the LGR process. I don't think both of those positions are sustainable collectively. So I would really hope that the leader of KCC will give an absolute clarification to all of us here in Medway and across the region as to what the actual position is. Is it acting in good faith, or is it actually putting a spoke in the works? She also wrote about council leaders, so the other council leaders of Kent. So as colleagues here will be aware, there are 14 councils, so when talking about other council leaders in Kent, she's referring to myself and 12 other colleagues. And it's reported that she said there is a shocking level of ignorance about local government reorganisation. Now, I appreciate that's a private meeting, but it's a private meeting that one of her own colleagues has now made public. And I would say that comment in particular is pretty disrespectful to myself and the other leaders of Kent. And I wonder, and I hope she will take the opportunity to apologise to all 13 of us. We have a meeting coming up next week. I look forward to hopefully hearing an apology from the leader of Kent County Council. And I want to put on record my thanks to the council leaders and chief executives who have worked in a very strong collaborative approach. Recognised by MHCLG, organisations like the LGIU, LGA, people have recognised that actually within Kent and Medway there is a very strong collegiate approach to this, even when sometimes there isn't agreement on every matter, and that's natural. I think we all recognise it's in the interest of the 1.9 million residents that we work collaboratively and collectively. So to hear that one of the 14 of us is saying that others have a shocking level of ignorance, I say, is disrespectful and not something I would expect to hear. And then the final thing that I've highlighted to the leader of KCC, and again, I appreciate that this was said in a private meeting that's now been put into the public domain by one of her colleagues, is that council leaders of Kent, other council leaders of Kent, which could include me, don't like working with her because she's a woman. I found that comment particularly ludicrous. I've treated Lyndon, along with every other council leader, chief executive, anybody I've ever dealt with, frankly, courteously, with humour where appropriate, and absolutely regardless of gender, party affiliation, or frankly any other characteristic. I really want to hear some clarification from her on this particular matter. To accuse me of being misogynistic is ludicrous. I haven't, in my letter, raised the issue of how she manages her own group meetings. That's a matter for her, but I'm very happy in this first opportunity to say I've never told anyone to suck it up. I think that's a pretty poor turn of phrase. I've never sworn at any meeting at any point ever in 18 years in Medway Council. People know that's not my style. And I think it's for her to reflect on whether that's appropriate for a leader of a county authority like Kent. So I wanted to update colleagues accordingly. I've had acknowledgement from the leader's office today. The letter has been received and brought to the attention of the leader of KCC. As and when I receive a response, I of course will share that with Cabinet colleagues, and as I have done, I'm sure I'll share it publicly as well. And I have shared my letter publicly with other colleagues and others in the community who have got an interest in this. Thank you for letting me update you on that. I think it's important because, again, that's of big interest to residents here in Medway and across our region of Kent. I'll move to the substantive agenda then. Thank you, everybody. We've got one apology tonight from Nina, who's on LGA matters tonight, so I hope she's having a successful session there. Are colleagues happy to agree the record of decisions from the September Cabinet meeting? Thank you. Let's move on to item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other significant interests. Anybody have anything to declare tonight? No, that's great, thank you. That then moves us on to item 4, questions to the Cabinet. You'll recall, colleagues, of course, this probably would have been the first meeting where we would have had this in a more formalised manner, but of course that's now on hold whilst we're still going through the processes which were adjourned last week. We have a period of 20 minutes for this session, and we'll be taking the questions first from members of the public, and then I think we have one question from a member of the Council, which we'll take finally. None of the questions are related to agenda items on the agenda, so we'll go to the order that they were submitted in. So I'm going to take the first question, which is not there because that's the last agenda. Bear with me just 1 second. I think this is on that one there. That's it. So I was looking at the questions from the last meeting. Councillor Perfect definitely doesn't have a question today, but Nancy Pauling of Gillingham does, and her question is to Alex Patterson. So over to you to ask your question.
As a resident of Jeffrey Street, Gillingham, I wish to raise a concern about the lack of evening parking availability in our area. Due to limited on-street availability and increasing residential demand, it is often extremely difficult to find a parking space after 6 p.m, despite holding a valid Residence G permit and contributing to local parking schemes. While searching for parking in the evenings, I regularly observe that both Littlewoods car park and the Jeffrey Street car park remain almost entirely empty. This seems a missed opportunity to support local residents who already contribute to parking schemes. Both car parks display signage stating that charges apply between 7 a.m. and 1 a.m, yet observations suggest that very few tickets are purchased after 6 p.m. I understand that the Britton Farm car park just up the road operates chargeable hours until only 6 p.m, which better reflects actual usage patterns. However, it is barrier locked overnight, meaning vehicles parked there cannot be accessed before 7 a.m. the following morning, which makes it unsuitable for many residents who may need to retrieve their cars earlier. I understand that under the Traffic Management Act 2004 and associated statutory guidance, councils are encouraged to review parking policies regularly to ensure they reflect local needs and make effective use of public assets. Given the low evening usage of the Littlewoods and Jeffrey Street car parks and the increasing difficulty residents face in finding parking, I believe this is an ideal opportunity to apply those principles. Would the Cabinet consider reviewing the evening policy for the Littlewoods and Jeffrey Street car parks with a view to allowing Resident G permit holders to park free of charge after 6 p.m. without overnight access restrictions? This change would make better use of existing infrastructure, improve resident satisfaction and likely have minimal impact on council revenue?
Thank you very much for that detailed question. Alex, your response?
Thank you for your question and for raising a very practical concern that affects many residents in Gillingham. We recognise the challenges faced by residents in areas like Jeffrey Street when trying to find parking in the evenings, even with a valid permit. Your observations about the low evening usage of nearby car parks, and it's news to me. I've lived in Medway long enough to remember a Marks and Spencer's on Chatham High Street. I don't remember the Littlewoods in Gillingham, but usage of nearby car parks such as Littlewoods and Jeffrey Street are noted and appreciated. We have recently commissioned a strategic parking review that includes a detailed assessment of how our car parks are used throughout the day and evening. This review specifically looks at underutilised car parks and considers whether changes to operational hours or access arrangements could help improve availability and better support local needs. So your suggestion to allow resident permit holders to use these car parks free of charge after 6 p.m. without overnight access restrictions is a practical one, and that will be fed into the review process, which is designed to ensure our parking infrastructure is used effectively and reflects the needs of the communities it serves.
Thank you very much, Alex. Do you have a short supplementary?
Okay. Thank you. Could you advise what process the council uses to assess and amend the car park in operating hours, and how we can stay informed and contribute to the review process?
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, certainly. So the process for reviewing operating hours and evening access policies for council managed car parks is currently being undertaken as part of a wider strategic parking review. And this review includes a detailed assessment of how our car parks are used throughout the day and evening, with particular attention to locations that appear underutilised. So as part of this work, consultants are conducting site audits, analysing occupancy data and gathering feedback from residents and stakeholders. The aim being to ensure our parking infrastructure is used effectively and aligned with local needs. The Parking Review commissioned includes a comprehensive audit of car park usage and revenue, identification of underutilised car parks and recommendations to improve their use, feasibility studies into new tariff banding based on demand and location, and consideration of differential pricing, including discounted permits and evening usage. The review will also assess operational periods of CPZs in car parks to ensure they meet current needs. This review aligns with statutory guidance under the Traffic Management Act, which encourages councils to regularly assess their parking policies to reflect local needs and make effective use of public assets.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Nancy, for a really helpful question. As it's part of that ongoing consultation, the timing is excellent, so it's very much to be welcomed. Next question is from Daniel Broom. Thank you. Take your time. There's no rush. We're going to take all 5 questions tonight, so there's no rush. Over to you.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Broom from the Q-Ship Society. We have expressed an interest in a plot of wasteland in which currently planning permission expires in 2026. The site, known as Collier Wharf or Collier Dock, is part of the second phase of the development of Chatham dockyards from 1874. Many historical features exist, such as a World War I Admiralty pattern pillbox, original mooring bollards, mooring fittings, flood walls, and a branch line spur, of which all these are of historical importance to the area. Most importantly, underneath the concrete are the remains of Gillingham Fort, a historic listed monument which lists in mind and the backing of local residents and Heritage England, listed in progress. The Q-Ship Society are appealing the decision to obtain this site and kindly request a consideration for the Q-Ship Society to be granted care of the site to the protection of its entirety and preserve as an important future for the home of the vessel that we are aiming to save, HMS Saxifrage. Currently stranded in a legal battle within Chatham docks, our hopes are for this to be considered in the regeneration of Gillingham Pier as a heritage harbour.
Thank you very much. Simon, your response.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for your question.
You're welcome.
The question, that area of land that you refer to, as you mentioned, is part of a site has already been granted planning permission under MC 112756 for the redevelopment of the wider Chatham Waters site, part of which has come forward for development in the last few years. The outline permission remains in place at the moment, and a reserved matters application for the area is expected in the near future. The Council does not hold any ownership, interest or control in this land with which to influence any future development proposals, but I would advise you to contact Peel as the landowner and applicant to discuss any potential issues and uses. The future role of the wider location is being considered in the new Medway local plan. The Council is working with landowners and stakeholders such as Historic England in planning for this area, which includes recognising the contribution of heritage to new development. The Planning Inspectorate will carry out an independent examination of the plan and confirm details of policies and site allocations. And just an additional point is that we're in the process of publishing our river strategy for Medway, which I'm hoping will come out in the Cabinet meeting in December. And in that plan, in that strategy, there's a great deal of information about heritage and the importance of it as well. So we are taking it very seriously from that perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Daniel, a brief supplementary question if you have one.
Yes, I do apologise. I've had to write it before I come out. With local support and support from further afield, we feel that this could become a popular heritage site that could increase the local tourism trade for the local businesses and local tourist attractions, which in turn could lead to events for local groups such as cadets, scouts and youth groups, amongst many others. We would also like to include youth groups, tech schools and universities to help with the restoration and fabrication of components for the vessel and the branch line spur. That's the end of my question.
Simon.
Thanks very much. Well, in that respect, we can certainly take those issues into consideration. As I say, I mentioned the publication of our river strategy, which covers quite a lot of that detail. One of the things the strategy does have in it is a riverside walk for the whole length of the river on that side. That's part of the plan that we've got for that area, and it's an aspiration I think many of us have wanted for a long time. And I know that Peel and the developers are very keen to play a part in that role all the way through the Gillingham area and into Chatham. So there are opportunities to engage with that consultation. I just mentioned that planning application, the reserved matters are coming forward, another opportunity to comment to the planning committee on how that is dealt with and how that's looked at as well. So there are opportunities for engagement at that level.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Let's move to question C, Onyx. When you're ready. And again.
Is that working now? Thank you. While the new bus service running to and from Otterham Park, the 3As and 3Cs are welcome, residents found the bus service really useful when it was extended to 5:30 p.m. in the summer holidays. And residents will find it useful having a bus service at weekends too. Is there any chance of extending the bus times on a more permanent basis and having a bus service during the weekends using Section 106 money to do this?
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much for your question, and I'm kind of agreeing with you in a lot of what you've just said, highlighting the importance of the 3A and 3 bus service to residents in and around Otterham Park. We're pleased to hear that the extended hours during the summer holidays were well received, and we recognise the value that local communities place on having reliable and accessible public transport, particularly later in the day and at weekends. The 3A, 3C service, which operates Monday to Friday, is supported by the Council, and it recorded 2,245 passenger journeys in September, averaging 102 passengers a day. The level of usage demonstrates the positive impact the service is having. We will be engaging with New Venture, who run the service, to explore the feasibility of extending the service to provide later journeys during the week and a service at weekends. Any potential changes will need to be considered in the context of available funding, including the possibility of using Section 106 contributions where appropriate and permissible. We remain committed to improving public transport options across Medway and will continue to work with operators and stakeholders to ensure that services meet the needs of our residents.
Thank you, Simon. Alex, a short supplementary question.
Yep. Do you know the timescale of when those conversations will happen?
I can't tell you an exact time scale in terms of that, but what I can tell you is the relationship we have with our bus services is really good. We meet with them on a monthly basis at different levels, and I meet with the officers on a monthly basis to discuss services. So it's something we take incredibly seriously. One of the aspirations of the council is to increase our bus trips numbers on an average per year up to 9 million. Currently, we're in a really good, strong place. Since over the last 2 years, our levels of bus usage and trip numbers has risen to 7.8 million a year for the year 24-25, which is fantastic to see that increase, certainly since COVID times. And as I'll tell you, our target for 2028 is an ambitious 9 million, but we're aiming at that. So that takes a lot of engagement with the bus companies. It requires a lot of funding as well to come in, and the government's been very supportive on helping bus service. So I would be optimistic if I were you from that point of view, because it is quite exciting what we're trying to achieve there. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. I was worried about a question about timetables and the timetable for timetables, but we didn't quite go there. Viv, please come up and ask your question. And this is for Luella.
Do the tower blocks on Chatham Riverside have their approval from the building safety regulator that they are safe to live in and can now be got ready for occupation?
Luella?
Thank you for your question, Vivian. I can assure you that all our occupied buildings have been registered with the building safety regulator and have their own unique high-rise building reference number. So each block on Chatham Riverside also has a fire strategy report, and that outlines the fire safety protocols under the relevant building regulations to which the development was built. A managing agent is employed to undertake the statutory health and safety checks to the life safety systems, and the scheme is also provided with sprinklers throughout and an on-site caretaker who also undertakes fire safety checks as part of their duties.
Okay, thank you. Can I do a supplementary?
Of course.
Thank you. What measures are the council going to undertake to ensure that all tower blocks being built in Medway will receive the relevant approval from the building safety regulator?
Thank you. Luella?
All tower blocks have to have that approval. We will check, especially if they're blocks owned by the council. But it is actually building control that give approval for people to occupy those blocks. And just in terms of our blocks, I can assure you that we have had sign-off for all those occupied buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. It gives me an opportunity to say it was great to be with Luella at the 5th anniversary of MDC, looking at some of those blocks. They were fantastic, and they did feel very safe indeed. So a very helpful question, and thank you, Luella, for the responses. That moves us on to members' questions. I'm having a scan around the room. I don't think Elizabeth is here, so I shall hand to Alex to give the response in absence. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. I'd just like to thank Councillor Turpin for her continued interest in my ward. But I'd like to challenge and correct a number of assertions which have been made in this question. For more than 20 years, a soft closure has been enforced on Saturdays between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Rochester High Street. This is not a pedestrian zone, as a hard closure involving a physical barrier like those on event days would be, but a closure which aims to reduce the number of vehicles on the High Street only to those which are authorised using the exemption criteria. I'm aware of genuinely held concerns by some residents about the removal of the chain, and while I do not necessarily expect them to agree with me, I hope this response comprehensively explains the rationale behind that decision and why I will not be reversing it. And I pray your indulgence, Vince, just for a an answer that might go slightly over regulation time, but I think it's really important to deal with this once and for all. The consultation in question was not a referendum on the enforcement of moving traffic offences, but simply a consultation on extending the same scheme to Sundays as well as Saturdays. The chain which was previously in place was there because the council at that time had no powers to enforce the restriction. That is no longer the case. The chain was regularly removed by motorists to enter the high street, allowing easy contravention of the restriction. As I've explained to Councillor Turpin in previous correspondence on the issue, while those breaking the rules had no difficulty in brazenly removing the chain with impunity, some of my elderly constituents lacked the same strength or dexterity to achieve the same result for entirely lawful purposes. The chain was also less efficient for the emergency services and was not always consistently deployed. The ANPR camera enforcement system now in place ensures that time-limited restriction is applied fairly and consistently, while still allowing for emergency and authorised access when needed. It also allows for the consistent enforcement of the long-standing 24/7, clearly signposted, no right or left turn restriction northbound from Bowley Hill onto the High Street, a rule which was routinely ignored by motorists, well aware that to be punished, they had to first be spotted making the manoeuvre by a police officer. So let me state this clearly, once and for all, the chain is not coming back. It's worth remembering that despite their party's political posturing since, these moving traffic enforcement schemes, including red routes, were instigated by the previous Conservative administration. And credit where it's due, it's a rare example of something that I think they got right. I would also remind Councillor Turpin and anyone else who may have conveniently forgotten that she was elected in May 2023 as a Conservative councillor. In her resignation comments last year, she cited a number of disagreements with her erstwhile colleagues, including their disastrous handling of Medway's finances, comments which I would not disagree with myself. However, I'm not aware of her voicing her opposition either before or at that time to the local enforcement of moving traffic offences. The claim that most people will not deliberately ignore restrictions, but will just miss signs, especially when they already know the area, and are instead concentrating on actually driving safely, is as dangerous as it is disingenuous. Observing road signs is such a basic part of driving that it seems scarcely believable that I should have to make the point. Those who don't are absolutely and demonstrably not concentrating on driving safely. And the suggestion that a sign, confirming what has been the case for more than 2 decades, might be especially confusing for someone who already knows the area and has never been able to drive there, is equally ridiculous. If some drivers need to visit the optician or brush up on their highway code, then it shouldn't require a penalty charge notice to force them to question just how attentive a driver they really are. Signage at this location has been reviewed and updated to ensure it is clear and visible to all road users. Enforcement through cameras is not intended to generate income, but to support compliance with traffic regulations that protect public safety. Any revenue from those PCNs is reinvested in our roads and other road safety schemes. If Councillor Turpin genuinely believes physical enforcement is required for the implementation of moving traffic offences, then I would question why she has not campaigned for similar chains to be introduced on school streets, which are indicated to motorists by identical signage to that on Northgate. Perhaps she believes a council officer should be on duty at junctions to prevent drivers from entering yellow boxes, or that we should employ people in high vis to run up and down Corporation Street, reminding people that the repeated signage and red paint telling them they can't stop really means what it says in the highway code. Or perhaps people who get behind the wheel could take personal responsibility for doing what they were supposed to have learned to do by the time they passed the driving test. Members are of course free to take up cudgels on behalf of any cause that takes their fancy, but I will certainly not lose any sleep over the protestations of careless or reckless motorists, and I would suggest that anyone who chooses to should reflect on how little thought selfish drivers give to the rest of us, and give them the same. This administration is on the side of people who follow the rules. That doesn't mean we can't occasionally make an honest mistake. But what I would expect of elected members is for them to take the side of those the law is there to protect, rather than rail against a system which they think didn't do enough to save the culprit from their own carelessness or recklessness. Learn the lesson, pay your fine, and drive more carefully the next time.
Thank you very much, Alex. A very comprehensive response, but I think an important one, because that question from Councillor Elizabeth Turpin is a question that's been posed in many different formats and areas. That response is very, very clear. And as you rightfully say, people have heard me say from this seat many, many times, follow the rules. So I thank you for that detailed response. That ends the period of questions. So thank you, everybody, for your questions and your responses. Let's move on to the substantive reports we've got coming forward tonight. Before we move into item 5, no one has indicated to me that they wish to move into closed session on this item. So on that basis, we will continue in open session, and I'll move to Luella to move this really important report. Thank you, Luella.
Thank you, Vince. First of all, I want to thank Bex Wilcox and the team for their hard work on this report, which seeks Cabinet's approval to formally commence the consultation for the recommended additional and selective licensing schemes. So colleagues will recall at last week's full council we voted on a motion regarding HMOs and the rate and scale of growth in certain areas within Medway. And I'm pleased that both the Labour and opposition groups voted in favour of the motion, with just the independent group who represent the Peninsula and Strood Rural abstaining. So I just want to make it clear that I want to ensure that the tenants in the private sector accommodation across the whole of Medway benefit from good quality standards of living. So as we know, it was Labour's Housing Act in 2004 that introduced the licensing to raise standards in the private rented sector, and colleagues will know the issues surrounding the need for licensing have been a long-term concern for our Labour group here in Medway, and I'm pleased that now as an administration we've taken the steps to review the current situation. Earlier this year, we instructed a feasibility study to be undertaken to support the implementation of additional and selective licensing to ensure that any action taken is based on fact. So I'll just explain about the selective licensing. So the feasibility study looked at conditions. There's a wide range of conditions, but they focused on two out of three, sometimes 1 out of 3, with poor housing, deprivation and antisocial behaviour. So the selective licensing covers non-HMO properties, and the study found that there were seven wards in Medway that met the criteria. They're Chatham, Central and Brompton, Fort Pitt, Gillingham North, Gillingham South, Luton, Strood North and Finsbury and Watling. So that's estimated to cover approximately 52% of the PRS in Medway. Now for additional licensing, that does concern with HMOs, and these will be for HMOs of 3 or more people from 2 or more households, and 6 wards met the criteria, and they were Chatham, Central and Brompton, Fort Pitt, Gillingham North, Gillingham South, Luton and Watling. So our actions, as I've said, are taken from evidence found in the feasibility studies, and we're not anti-HMO or anti-landlord. You know, there's a place for HMOs. They're needed, like all the other private rented accommodation. But as I've said previously, and I want to remind everybody that we do want to work with good landlords. You know, we want to have good working relationship with the landlords in Medway. The idea is to improve the standard of accommodation, and as we know, this affects health, and like physical and mental health, and Therese will be able to comment on that, the general well-being of our population, and housing has such an impact on people. So we want everyone to have good quality and affordable accommodation, and property licensing is a way to support the vulnerable residents, improve property conditions. That includes fire safety and management standards, as well as dealing with problems of antisocial behaviour. So this paper sets out the legal requirements for implementation, and the cost of running the additional selective licensing schemes will be met from future years' revenue generated in the schemes. So in its first year of operation, it will be funded through the earmarked house reserves, which will be replenished as the scheme begins to start generating income to pay for itself. So our recommendations are, to approve option 3, which is the introduction of the additional and selective licensing scheme in the wards set out, as I mentioned, to instruct officers to commission the statutory consultation requirements to implement the new licensing scheme, in addition to our mandatory licensing scheme we have in place, and that officers provide a further report to our April Cabinet meeting 2026 with a view to making a decision on whether or not to proceed with the additional and selective licensing schemes in Medway. So I'll leave it there for any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Luella. I've got Teresa and Simon and Tracy.
Thank you, Luella, and my thanks to the officers who've worked very hard on this. It's not an easy thing to bring forward, but it's long overdue. For me, I've got a range of concerns that bringing this scheme forward will hopefully address. One of them is that we're the guardians of public money, and we've got to make sure, particularly, that those landlords who are in receipt of housing benefit from tenants make best use of it, and that those tenants are treated as well as anybody else who may be paying the rent directly from their own earnings. And it has been the case in the past that there's been complacency by landlords who've got housing benefit tenants in the kind of, you know, attitude that, well, they'll get the rent anyway. What does it matter about the standard of repairs, the standard of the property, and so on? Now, those landlords, I think, probably are in the minority, but they make a significant impact on the way that public money is used. So this is our way, your way, of making sure that we level up standards. We've talked already this evening about playing by the rules, and here's another example about it. If you want to be a landlord, your tenants, whoever they are, deserve to have decent standards, deserve to get their repairs done in a timely way, to have a fair rent, and to be able to be given proper notice if the rental agreement is going to come to an end, instead of allowing people, as happens sometimes, to fall back onto the public purse when the landlord decides that they don't want them in their property anymore. I think that I'm optimistic about this. I think in the consultation we will see good landlords who want to work with the council coming forward. And I'll be interested to hear their ideas on ways that we can improve things and work together. We've already got the One Medway lettings agency to help and support people and stop them being fleeced by less conscientious letters in the private sector. And here's another way of making the public sector a friendly place for people who want to do the right thing. So I'm looking forward to hearing the results of the consultation. I hope and expect that we will be able to bring this scheme in next April, and that as a result of that, people who live in private rented accommodation will be much better off and more secure. And as you said, Luella, the impact of not having a secure home on people's mental well-being, on their physical well-being, is absolutely dreadful. It means often that children find that they haven't got space to do their homework, that the home is cold, that people don't know when they're going to be able to get something done or a dress like damp it in the house. And especially if you keep being given short-term contracts, then it's impossible to plan. And very often it makes it difficult to get other kinds of credit and even other forms of employment. So this is a very far-reaching piece of work that has a direct and positive impact on the wider determinants of health that we're so keen to improve, as well as making Medway a better place to live.
Thank you, Teresa. Simon?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you very much, Luella, for this much-needed and long-awaited report. It's fantastic to see it coming forward. Hugely important, something that we were working on when we were in opposition as well, before we took over the administration 2.5 years ago, and to see it come through now is very exciting. This is a transformational piece of work for the lives of a lot of people in Medway, and I can see it bringing so much good. And I think Part 3 of the report sort of highlights how many strategies we've got, whether it's a housing strategy or our community safety partnership or our health and well-being or our homelessness. All those are impacted by doing this piece of work. So I'm really looking forward to the outcome of the consultation. It's hugely important, and it has other impacts as well in terms of our environmental footprint as well. These standards are going to increase the quality of homes across Medway, and as a result of that, things like heating bills will drop and make our impact on the environment less, and all sorts of things we're going to cascade out of getting this piece of work done. So huge thanks to the officers and to yourself for bringing it forward at this time. It's one of the most important things we'll probably do in our first administration, and I think it's very exciting and looking forward to the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Tracy?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Luella, for bringing this forward. It's been a long time coming, so it's really good to see this here tonight. As you've said, HMO is a really important part of the private rental sector, but unfortunately they're the part of the private rental sector that brings the most complaints, certainly to my inbox, and I know that some of my fellow councillors, particularly in the wards that you've mentioned here, and completely agree with others who have said that the majority of HMO landlords are responsible, and it's that small number who are not that bring these complaints in. And bringing this forward will mean that we've got greater oversight of these landlords, that we're able to hold them accountable, that we're able to take enforcement action on those who are not maintaining their properties to the standards that they should be, who are not properly managing their properties and their tenants. And when they're not properly managed, this leads to all sorts of problems. The accommodation is lower standards, so the residents are left in unsuitable accommodation, often with hazards in there. It often means that waste collection isn't properly managed, which leads to fly tipping, leads to littering, which doesn't just impact the residents, but the wider community, the people who live in these streets, who have these HMOs next door to them and in their roads. So I really, really am pleased to see this coming forward so that we can make sure that all our landlords are responsible landlords and hopefully see our inboxes quieten down. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm all for a quieter inbox. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Before I come back to you, Luella, I just want to say 2 or 3 quick things on this item. As Simon said, this is something which many of us have been shouting about for a long time, long before May 2023, actually. And the fact it's taken this long since we first started talking about it is frustrating, but my goodness, we've moved as quick as we can since we've had our privilege to be leading this administration. And your personal commitment, I was lucky enough when we had the regulator of social housing inspection happening. I was there when they were asking you questions, and the point that you made really incredibly powerfully during that conversation was twofold. One, of course, that inspection is all about our properties as a landlord, but actually the bigger issue for Medway is not us as a landlord, it's some of those rogue landlords. And the point you made around actually you want every house in Medway to be good enough for your family to live in it, I think that's an incredibly powerful statement. One, I'm not sure if we've shared publicly before, but we just have now. And actually having a portfolio holder who's got that dedication, to me, says why this is coming forward. I've been really pleased, and again, like others, I would want to recognise the incredible work of the team that have got this to this point. And certainly, actually, one of the recommendations, having that slightly wider footprint. In the initial conversation, certainly when we were in opposition, the indication was that lots of other councils have perhaps done this for what would be the equivalent of 1 or 2 wards in Medway. Having that much wider footprint is critically important. And this will be a set of important tools. It won't be everything, but it'll be a set of important tools. The final thing I would say, and again, I want to thank you for your work, particularly at full council, in galvanising the vast majority of councillors behind the amendment that you put forward, is of course recognising that this is part of a wider conversation. And if anyone's in any doubt why this is such an important, urgent matter, look at tomorrow night's planning committee agenda. Blimey. That to me says the system, I've never seen an agenda like it really, with everything being either a children's home, which have aspects of HMO, or an actual HMO. We need to be, as others have said, HMOs will have always and will always play a part in Medway's housing because of the nature of some of our housing that we have across our community. But to see the rapid changes happening, I think we do need to be taking further action, and I'm pleased that this report is certainly a long way towards getting to where we need to. And again, that's down to your leadership and the outstanding council officers we have here in Medway. Luella, back to you.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks, everyone, for your comments. As Tracy says there, the property management of some of our existing HMOs is less than satisfactory, let's say, and that does have a huge impact on the neighbourhood, on the people immediately next door, living in the same streets, with parking, refuse. That is all to do with property management. So licensing should change that. And as you say, Teresa, about short-term tenancies, improved standards of accommodation should likely make people stay in these properties longer, giving security, particularly to children, because they're sometimes pushed from one place to another. They've still got to go to school. They still want to keep their friends, but they're not getting a settled home life, and that's what I really want to see changed. So thanks for the comments. Simon, I was going to mention all of the connections, but you got them there, but I'll just repeat again. This contributes to our overall One Medway plan, the Medway Community Safety Partnership Plan, our joint local health and wellbeing strategy, our own council housing strategy, as well as our homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. So it does so much. So I really appreciate the support. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Luella. Other recommendations agreed? Thank you. That moves us to the next agenda item, visitor economy and inward investment. We're taking a very unusual, for this cabinet, an unusual approach to withdraw the paper from tonight's agenda. And I think it's really important to share the context as to why we are doing that. Clearly, it's a disappointing backdrop that we find ourselves in with the end of both Visit Kent and Locate in Kent. And I want to thank, once again, the hard-working staff at those two organisations for everything they did for our community and for the wider region of Kent and Medway. Since those two difficult bits of news have happened, there's been some really strong cross-council working between Medway Council and Kent County Council, both at senior level officers, so our Director of Place has been involved in that, along with other members of the team here in Medway, and his opposite numbers at KCC. And I want to thank every one of those officers from both councils for the really innovative, kind of wide-ranging approach they've taken in a really short space of time to bring forward the report we see in front of us tonight. We as a council were contacted late on Friday after the papers for tonight's council were published with a request from the Reform UK Cabinet at Kent County Council to increase the financial contribution from Medway Council by 100%, whilst at the same time reducing the Kent County Council contribution. Absolutely ridiculous way of trying to deal with what is a sensitive but really important issue, particularly recognising that actually this is after we had already published our papers for discussion today. So actually, in one sense, bearing in mind that was Friday, actually what we saw the following day from Kent County Council's Reform UK group probably didn't come as much of a surprise. They're absolutely chaotic. They don't really understand how local government is run. And frankly, trying to work in a very professional way, as all of us here at Medway do, to come to us after our cabinet papers have been published to ask us to increase our contribution by 100% was never going to happen. So we are left in no other position but to withdraw tonight's paper. We will enter into discussions with them. The work that's been done by officers is excellent work. And I want to be really clear, this is not an officer decision. This is a political decision by the Reform UK Cabinet at Kent County Council. But flying in the face of having any reasonable process of running a council facility like this on a joint approach, because if they were looking at that, this conversation certainly at least would have happened before we had published tonight's agenda. I'm going to pass over to Harinder in a moment, who's the cabinet member with responsibility for this for Medway. But I do want to emphasise once again, it's incredibly frustrating we're having to do this, not least because actually both the areas of work, the visitor economy and inward investment, they're important to the region of Kent and Medway. They're really important to our community here. Jobs are involved, you know, making sure that we're getting that message out across the rest of the region, across the country and internationally. All of that work is scuppered, certainly in the short term, because of their inability to understand, frankly, how local government works. Harinder, I want to pass to you, and then we'll obviously move on to the next agenda item. Harinder, please.
Thank you, Vince. Yeah, I think disappointing is the word that I would use as well. It is, in the nature of what we were trying to do, a joint delivery model. So it's a partnership. And the work that, you know, you've outlined that the officers had already undergone is good work, and I'm sure we will benefit from it. But that partnership really is well placed for us as Medway, because we're small enough to benefit from the economies of scale that this kind of model would actually provide, but also large enough to partner up and contribute in a way that would benefit both Medway residents and Kent residents as well. But in the spirit of partnership, this is not what that looks like. You don't, after publishing, you don't just double the ask of a partner. That's not what this should look like. Now, as you've indicated, we're always up for discussion. We always will be, and we still are. So let me stress that we're still up for discussion. I'm sure this will progress, and it just means just pausing for a moment to take a little bit of time to see what the arrangements could be. I would also just like to flag and add, that actually Councillor King, my opposite number, did reach out to me, and he did discuss this, although late in the day, but he did try to engage. So actually, that I just want to put that out there, that was appreciated. But whoever is taking this decision, and it's difficult to know that, you know, given with past events and in the KCC reform, they need to get a grip, because I think they're confusing the theatrics of politics with good governance, and no good can come from that. So I think we're quite clear. Behaving like this isn't in the best interests of Medway residents or Kent residents, but we're open to discussion, so we will do so. And let's, you know, for that reason alone, let's get this going, or whether it's the fact that it's the right model and it will benefit residents, or whether that we want to make sure that we capture the expertise that will within Locate Kent and also Visit Kent, and we want to make sure that we safeguard all of those assets, including the website and all the other data that they have. It's very, very important that we get going and moving on with this, but we do need to take a little bit of time to think about how best to do it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that update, Harinder. I'm going to briefly bring in Teresa, and then because we're not debating an item, but I will briefly bring in Teresa, and then we'll move on to the next item, Adam.
I mean, thank you, Vince and Harinder, for putting everyone in the picture, including people who are watching tonight. Look, this is a bit more than disappointing. This is about a situation where pride in our region and the image of our region, the region of Kent in the world, to investors, to people who want to come here, to tourists, is actually being sacrificed on the altar of silly politics. We are partners, so are the other district councils, who would have all been very happy to take part in a discussion about this if there'd been problems, and would always make the time in the interests of our region. You know, I'm in Medway, this is my home, but I'm proud of the rest of Kent as well, and visit the rest of Kent and enjoy the rest of Kent, and want everybody else in Kent to do as well as I want people in Medway to do. I'm afraid this is about a sort of confused race to the bottom, where Reform in KCC are scrambling around looking for any type of money to pretend that Doge actually has been a success, instead of investing to save, in this case, investing to save Kent from being left out of important investment and tourism. And I think it's really sad, actually. So I hope that the leader of Kent County Council is listening. I hope that the partnerships will continue. I feel sorry for the hard-working officers who've put their heart and soul and professionalism into this, and I'm pleased at least that Councillor King has reached out to try to behave in a collegiate manner. Whether he's going to be permitted to carry on doing that, who knows, after what we've seen over the weekend. But I think you're remaining positive and optimistic, so shall we. And any investors out there have got my absolute assurance, and I'm sure the assurance of the whole Cabinet and all of our senior officers, that we will do the best we can, but not at any price, and not in the last 5 minutes, at the 11th hour, and all the other sort of metaphors and cliches I can think of. Want to do this properly. And I hope that people in Kent County Council will think again and join us in making sure that we give the best image to the rest of the country, to the rest of the world, about our lovely region.
Thank you very much, Teresa. As Harinder says, we hope a report will come to a future council cabinet meeting here. It is due to go to a cabinet meeting there as well. I'm not sure what's happening with that. Again, there's been no correspondence with me, for example, from my opposite number, either as a leader or indeed as a finance portfolio holder on this issue when it comes to this ongoing discussion. So we will keep colleagues informed. And Harinder, thank you for your personal work. And Adam, could I ask that you pass on my personal thanks to both the team here at Medway and the team at KCC, dedicated professional officers who, frankly, in this case, in my view, have been let down by their cabinet. Let's move on to the next item, which is a really positive one. Adam, over to you for the item around the Adoption Partnership South East annual report.
Okay. Thank you, Vince. Just to remind members here, cabinet members, we are part of the Regional Adoption Agency, which we do in partnership actually with Kent and with Bexley, the London Borough of Bexley. And basically, the Regional Adoption Agency provide adoption services for Medway, Kent and the London Borough of Bexley. Now, this annual report for 2024/2025, it's important that we receive it, not least because we are corporate parents still for the adopted children as well as for foster, looked after children as well. So it's important that we know what's going on, because we do retain that responsibility as corporate parents for Medway children. So the report includes detailed information about children's adoption journey, and it reports on the voice of adopted children and also the adoptive parents, how children's needs are being placed right at the centre, and there's information there about adopter recruitments and the number of people inquiring about adopting through the APSE. I need to refer to the fact that this did go to scrutiny on the 2nd of October. I'd like to thank Amy Coombs for having come in person to present that annual report, and I did watch it online as well myself. What was really good is that there's been brilliant feedback, both from the reports but also from members at that scrutiny committee, about individual social workers and how they really work in a very proactive and in a very positive way with our both adopted parents and potential adopted parents. During the last year, the partnership was successful in getting funding from the Department for Education to assist with several projects. I think my machine's picking up my voice, so I'm just telling it to be quiet. Basically, we've got changing needs for families within Medway, and one of the things that the RAA has been working on has been earlier permanence scheme. So this is whereby children are going into fostering arrangements, potentially with a view to that family adopting the child. Obviously, we know it's a very rigorous exercise to go through to be accepted as adoptive parents, but where it's possible for the children going into care to be placed with a family that is hopefully going to ultimately take on and give them a permanent home, then that's got to be better for our children. So they're working on that. They're also working on promotion of growth in community engagement by the volunteer adopters across the region. And I'm pleased to report that there's been an increase in adoption for Medway children in the last year, and there's been a significant rise in placement orders for children to be placed for adoption. Now, the timescales between placement orders and matching with adopters continues to outperform the national average. So that's a real acid test of the difference that the regional agency is making for us. And scrutiny themselves commented on the partnership working. I'm just going on to talk about how it provides good value for money. Now, in the first 3 to 4 years, there was an agreement whereby Medway would pay the same as they had paid in previous years before entering into the agency. We're now into the first couple of years post that, and what that's meant is that our input into the budget has decreased from about 23% down to 20% in line with the demographics of our population. We did have a small underspend as well, which was returned to us to go into the next year's budget. There's been continuing work on the life story. I know from the visits that I make on safeguarding to families of foster carers, the emphasis which foster carers place on keeping a good record with photographs, etc., of the life story of the children that come into their care. And the regional adoption agency is working on with adoptive parents to be able to continue that good work through the adopted phase of their care within their childhood. Also getting support for their identity about who their grandparents were, etc. All those really important things. Scrutiny did also ask about the support available for families post-adoption, and because it's recognised that there can be considerable challenges, particularly in the first 2 years after adopters agree to take on adopted children. So the regional adoption agency is implementing a catch-up call service. So this is where adopters voluntarily agree that they will be phoned maybe just once a year, might be less than that, just to ask them how things are getting on a proactive basis, rather than having to turn to the services available when things are ratcheting up and problems are arising. So like a stitch in time saves 9. And there was also discussion about local support, because it's recognised that families might find it hard to access some of the support groups, bearing in mind that this is organised on a regional basis, which is much vaster than Medway. There is a vision for increase in local community groups, but it does remain a challenge due to the size of the region. So I'm very pleased to move acceptance of this report, and I'd be interested to know about any comments that members have got. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I'll take Tracy first, then Teresa.
Thank you for bringing this, Adam. What a really positive report it was. Loads and loads of successes. The work that they've done is making such a difference to our young people. The thing I particularly wanted to mention that I was really pleased to read about was the success of the Enhanced Matching for Sibling Groups project. It's so important that children are kept together in their sibling groups. They've been through quite a traumatic time before they get to this point, and it is particularly difficult to place sibling groups with adoptive families. So the work that's been done here to address this and the impact that that has had is so important. So it's thanks to the strong focused work in this area that 43 adoptive households were approved for sibling groups during this project. And the quote from one of the adoption social workers really nicely sums up the success, where they said that finding adopters for siblings seems easier at the moment than finding them for younger children. And that's thanks to the really focused work that the team have done on the training, on the identification, on the support that's given. So I just particularly wanted to mention that and to say well done for the team and their successes in that area.
Thank you, Tracy. Teresa, please.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Adam, and to everybody who contributed to it. It's a really readable report, and as Tracy has said, it contains some really heartwarming stories, very sincerely written and giving us a window into what it's like for an adoptive family to be successful. I think the partnership is very good value for money, actually, in particular because it's given us the ability to support adopted families more than we've been able to do in the past. It's a huge undertaking, wanted, lovingly entered into, but with lots and lots of difficulties along the way, because children who need to be adopted have often led chaotic and actually quite harmful lives. And the love and attention and care that they need is something very special indeed. And I think what the partnership has done is given us the ability to support the whole adopted family, including grandparents and other, possibly biological siblings that come in, that the children come into a household to join, friends, all of the support network that, like every family, an adoptive family needs to be successful and hold together whatever life throws at them. And we've known in these modern times that being aware of who you are as a child and where you came from is very important and contributes strongly to having stable mental health and a sense of self. So those life story books, many of which are shared on an annual basis with biological parents, are really important. You know, they're not a novelty. They actually form the basis of that journey that an adopted child and their adoptive family goes on, and provide reflection and the celebration of success. So I'm really pleased we're in the partnership. I hope that we can continue to be, and I think it, as Tracy has said, it's given our social workers some additional capacity actually to do the things that they've wanted to do before we were in the partnership, but just were not able to, and sharing the experiences of other authorities and other families within the partnership is absolutely critical too, and that's what being in the partnership has created as an opportunity. So thank you for bringing it forward and for supporting the partnership, and I'm sure that all of the Cabinet will give this report our support tonight.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Before I come back to Adam, I would echo what both Teresa and Tracy have said. This is a really positive report. I wanted to pull out in particular page 174 of our report, page 18 of the actual Adoption Partnership South East report. And this is the Young Persons Reference Group. And in the sense of bringing together those young people from across the three upper tier authority areas, really powerful actually. And again, in one sense, I don't think anything in the two activities kind of struck me as hugely surprising. There's definitely some challenges there. And again, it goes back to that point around the fact we're all corporate parents and we would want to be asking those questions as well. So I do think, I think this is a really great example of collaborative, collective working. And the final thing I would say, and Cabinet colleagues will probably be slightly bored of this by the time we get to April 2028, we do need to understand what this will look like. And particularly in that shadow year, you know, as the only unitary currently in the region of Kent and Medway, I'd be very strongly encouraging, hopefully 4, maybe 3, probably not 1, however many councils we have, they should be having membership of this from day 1. And I hope they reflect upon that as well. Adam, back to you.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. It is really, really a positive story within that report. And on a personal basis, I'm very pleased that like one of my erstwhile friends, although he's moved from the area, Bill and Caroline Esterson, who are the, Bill is now the MP for Sefton South, I think it is. But he was and he used to be children's spokesperson when Labour was in opposition on this council, and he went through all the rigorous adoption things before he moved out of the area. And the stories that I've heard about the sibling group of a brother and sister, they've really been flourishing. It was really tricky in the first couple of years, which was echoed in this report, but I've just got nothing but praise, and you know, I'm really pleased to know that there's such good work being put on, because children matter in Medway or in Sefton or anywhere like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. So recommendations agreed? Thank you. Let's move on then to agenda item 8. That sits with me, and I want to thank officers for their work on this. I'll move the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1. And I think it's worth saying right at the start of this item, this work has been going on for several months to get to where we, as is commonplace for most cabinet reports, they don't just appear at random. There's work that brings them here. The issue of flags has become quite emotive, as we know across Medway. We had the meeting, in fact, this time last week. I was in a church, not in Chatham, but in Rainham. And there was an interesting conversation there. And I recognise that our local democracy reporter, who's here tonight, gave an excellent and I think a fair overview of some of the things that came out of that. This protocol is not about that. So I just want to be really explicitly clear. This is not about other things that are happening. This is very much about what we do as the civic leaders for our buildings, and in particular our headquarters, Gun Wharf, and also to a lesser extent Rochester Castle and indeed Upnor Castle, and colleagues will see within the report a specific reference in paragraph 4.1. I know if Nina was here tonight, she would obviously clarify that point, which is important. So why bring forward a protocol at all? Actually, this is about, again, as I said earlier on, following the rules, and that's difficult to do if you haven't got a rule book. So since Medway Council has existed, we've never really had anything which formalises how we deal with the issue of flags. There is advice and guidance and rules that we have to follow from central government and Cabinet Office and MHCLG and others, but this is about what we do and what we choose to do. And look, there are other councils in our region who take a different view on flags. I fundamentally disagree with them, but that's a matter for them. That's their civic centre, that's their council chamber, whatever it might be. This is about what we're doing under our leadership collectively and collaboratively here in Medway. So this is about bringing together the work that we've been doing in the last 2.5 years, and I'm very proud of the vast array of different flags that we've had there, and that's on page 216. A number of those had never flown in Medway before we took the administration in 2023, and I've had very positive feedback from the community at large, but often the specific community who is perhaps impacted by the raising of some of these flags. And so we will continue to do that. I'm getting more requests, as you can imagine, so particularly with circumstances in the Middle East, there's a suggestion that we may raise both the Palestinian and Israeli flag to show our commitment to the two-state solution, and that's something we'll be taking consideration of, but not until we've gone through this process and we have a protocol. I want to also highlight as well, particularly the reference in the report from our really important Equalities Board, something which I listened to carefully here from the Council's perspective. And that feedback, informal consultation and feedback, is in paragraph 8.1. And that shows actually this is about fostering good relationships within our community. So I'm really proud of the work we've done. We are legally compliant. I'm obliged to say that as well. We haven't been. There are a number of councils who hadn't been. When that came to my attention, I made sure that we were. So I'm pleased that we move forward being legally compliant around, and that's covered in paragraph 4.4. Funnily enough, I had a resident write to me about that very specific issue, and I was very pleased to say, yes, we've got planning consent as is required, as indeed does Kent County Council as well. So they have the same ability to do things. That's a matter for them whether they choose to or not. So happy to move this forward. And again, obviously there is a level of flexibility within it, as you would imagine, particularly to amend that as regards Upnor Castle when it comes to that issue, if we do hand that back to English Heritage. There is an ongoing conversation, and of course we will deal with that, but not have to bring that back here. So that's where 1.3 is particularly important. I've got Teresa, Luella, Alex, Simon, in that order.
Thank you, Vincent, and thank you to everyone who's helped put the protocol together. Look, this is important. It's about what flags are for, about pride, about inclusivity, about diversity, and about celebration. And as civic leaders, we've got a responsibility to make sure that everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. On Friday, I'll be looking forward to raising the United Nations Day flag, celebrating 193 countries who are still, despite the ravages of war and the instability in the world, working together for peace and solidarity. We'll be commemorating 80 years ago when the UK was one of the 5 audacious nations who directly after suffering the Second World War came together in the hope and expectation for peace. I'm proud to celebrate that. It's important that we raise a flag, and it's important that in this year, where we've remembered the 80th anniversary of VE Day, with celebration right across the community of the relief and happiness that brought, with sombre reflection on the 80th anniversary of VJ Day in a different way, but still very important, and now the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, coming together, doing what 193 countries in the world want to do, celebrate peace, solidarity, development, sharing, helping each other, all of those things actually that I think are very important to people in Medway and that you can see, in fact, on the streets every day. Not about division, not about intimidation, a way that we can, as civic leaders, make sure that these important occasions take pride of place and that everyone gets an opportunity to join in.
Thank you. Luella, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud that we raise the Union flag all the time at Gunwharf, but I'm also exceptionally proud about the, as Teresa said, celebration, support that we have. You know, Armed Forces Day, Windrush, flag goes up, we've got the red ensign, pride, and you could tell how everyone feels pride because recently when we had our young female, I mean I'm a rugby fan, young female rugby players all, you know, coming to Gunwharf really proud, you could tell in their faces they were as proud as we are to raise the St George's Cross to support the Red Roses, which won the World Cup. So I had to throw that in, sorry, but it does mean something. So I think, you know, yes, we need a protocol. I fully support it, and I hope to see various flags coming up over the years to come, supporting all sorts of our diverse community that we've got here in Medway.
Thank you, Luella. Alex.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I absolutely want to give my support to this protocol because I think it is important that on something which is so important in terms of the respect it shows for the flag, that things are done properly. I think that as a private citizen, I think that as a former Armed Forces champion for this council, and I also reflect on the fact that as a Cub Scout, as a Sea Scout, as a Venture Scout over a period of 12 years, I've probably raised more flags and lowered more flags than certain individuals that we might not mention tonight in this meeting. So I know a thing or two about it, and I also know there are always rules around these things, and that you show your respect by following the rules. There it is again. There's lots of strange rules. There's quirks that the general public don't often understand. I recall when Princess Diana died, and there was a clamour for a flag to be flown at half-staff at Buckingham Palace, which I thought was pretty odd, because there wasn't a flag flying there at the time, because Her Majesty the Queen was not in residence. And actually, in terms of protocol, it would have seemed rather odd to put a flag up even to half-staff to mark the death of somebody. So the rules are there. They applied, even in that case, to Her Majesty the Queen and her residence. So I do think that people who profess to know an awful lot about these things should maybe do a little bit of research. I did mention the Scouts, and I just want to take this cheeky opportunity to mention the fact that it was my privilege to address Medway Town's District Scouts at their AGM a couple of weeks ago. And I think that they are a fantastic example of how we put our patriotism into practical action, that when they promised to do their duty to God and to the King, if that's the promise that they choose to take. What that actually means and about the real life patriotism in action that shows, and the fact that they also choose to follow the rules when it comes to other things that groups undertake, such as putting up poppies on lampposts around the remembrance period. And I pay particular tribute to the 21st Medway and Ferris and the group scout leader there for the fantastic job that they do in making sure that our community does mark that. But I would reiterate, when they do that, they do so having sought and received permission from the council for doing so. They put them up and they take them down again. That's another thing that's important about flags. And we're talking about them flying at half-mast. Maybe that's something that people should reflect on. The particular specific period where flags should fly at half-mast is not because your ladder's too short and you couldn't reach any higher. It's because it has a meaning. And so those rules are really important. We put flags up and we take flags down each day. That's part of the respect we show them. We don't use them to mark territory. We use them to bring our community together, and I'm really happy to support this.
Thank you very much, Alex. Simon, please.
Yeah, echoing obviously the comments of my colleagues in this and agreeing with them on that. And I think it's really important to understand what flags are historically. They come and go with the seasons, they come and go with the ages and the times and everything else. But as always been reflected, every diverse group in our community has some sort of symbol that recognises them for who they are, and often that's a flag. And bringing the flags together like we do at Gun Wharf and putting them there shows that even though we've got a diverse community, we are actually united as one community as well. We're sitting in a hall full of flags. I don't know what some of them mean actually, but I know they actually mean a lot to a lot of people, and that's why they're still here. And they're here and they're hung respectfully in a proper way in order to demonstrate the fact that whatever they represent, we understand and we respect the people whose lives sit behind these flags. And actually the one straight above us there says forward together. And I think that kind of sums up what the flags are for. It's about being together as a community in our diversity and happy with that and moving forward together.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, everybody. I'm looking for any other contributions before I wrap the debate up. Okay, thank you. I agree with everything that people have said there. So, Simon, you are right to highlight kind of our heritage and history. I can see the Rochester flag, the Chatham flag, the Gillingham flag, the Kent flag, and of course some military flags as well, really important to our community. But the one right behind me is the Medway flag that says forward together, and I'm incredibly proud of that, and that's what we do collectively every single day. Alex, your point, and thank you for attending that AGM on behalf of the Cabinet. Really grateful you could find time to get to that. And they are inspiring young women and men who will be the leaders of the future. Some of them are the leaders of today, following the rules, paying respect, doing the right thing, being patriotic. And I want to take a moment to actually thank those adult leaders, because again, those scout troops in particular couldn't exist without adults giving their time, paying back to the community. So thank you for attending that, and thank you for that feedback, which I know we all value. Llewellyn, I was really pleased that you mentioned the Red Roses. I was incredibly proud of the moment where we brought players from a number of teams from across Medway. But of course, one in particular you would want to mention, and it was great to join Medway Rugby Club recently for their amazing festival of rugby, their minis. And it was great that people at very short notice were able to give time, and you and I were watching the final with bad Wi-Fi travelling up to the Labour Party conference. And it was great that we could fly it on the Monday after England had won. That was great. And Teresa, you are, as always, correct on this. It's about unifying our communities. And absolutely every request that comes forward, I would imagine it would have to be a pretty extreme example for us not to want to bring forward anything that can support our community and recognise the positive impact that something like showing that can fly. And as others have said, it's about paying respect to that part of our community. But just to be very, very clear, because this sometimes gets questioned, the default on a day when there's not any particular celebration or recognition is the Medway Council flag and the Union flag flown the correct way, because we respect that flag. So I want to thank colleagues. As I say, I appreciate that somebody just looking at the council agenda may have thought this was a response to things which are happening in our community and communities across the country. That's not the case. But I would finish this by saying, when it comes to this issue, I think it sends a loud, clear message that this council is about making sure that people's voices are heard, whether that's heard through things like Medway Matters Live, and it's great that we were able to have one of those recently, or actually heard by putting up that flag, respecting that part of our community. We're 292,000 different stories in Medway, but we're one Medway, and that's how we show it at our civic headquarters. Thank you, everybody. Are you happy to agree the recommendations as laid out in paragraph 1? Thank you. Let's move to the final item tonight. Alex, over to you. Review of the taxi tariff. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Obviously, there's a lot of detail in the report, and I'm not going to repeat all of that in this item. But just to remind colleagues and the general public that this is the first time that we have actually conducted a taxi tariff review since July 8th, when we agreed the new taxi tariff review policy. So essentially that is that new policy in action for the first time. What this is also doing, and it's the last time we will be doing this without so close to the event, I suppose. This is the first time that we'll be incorporating the New Year and Christmas taxi tariffs into the standard rate card without the need for a special lastminute.com meeting to agree something that, funnily enough, comes around every year. Just want to also point out that so the policy, in general, what the policy does is we have a review every 2 years of the taxi tariffs. And what that new policy agrees is that every review will consider 3 items: flag, that's the amount you can't avoid paying as soon as you sit down in the back seat of the taxi; the yardage, which is how far you get to go before it ticks up by 20 pence, as it often seems to do when you're stuck in a queue, but that's just the nature of the beast; and one other element. So that means we're not going to be doing a wholesale review. This is to reflect both good practice but also council resources and a prudent use of council resources, which is something that I think we can all agree is really important. So this time, that third element is reviewing waiting time, and that is something that we're doing on the basis of responses from our licensed trade. So we're not imposing what it is that we are reviewing each time. We are consulting freely on this. I'm really delighted at the close relationship that I certainly enjoy with the Medway licensed Taxi Driver Association and Nigel Jackson, who does a fantastic job at representing his members' views at the appropriate levels on all manner of issues. We don't always agree, but he certainly does a fantastic job at making sure that those voices are heard, and long may that relationship continue. So just to direct members to the different appendices. So Appendix A sets out the current tariff card. Appendix B is the draft tariff card that we're setting out to approve tonight. Appendix C is the result of the survey, the questions and answers in terms of asking the trade what it is they would like to review in the first instance and what changes they would like to make. And then finally, you're able to see in free text format in Appendix D some of the consultation responses. So there was overwhelming support for reviewing and increasing the but I say increasing the yardage. I think it may be better to say reducing the yardage, and that you don't get quite so far for your 20 pence under the new tariff. But that's entirely reasonable. No one would deny that, like everyone in Medway, we are all still feeling many of the impacts of Trussonomics and the disastrous budget of a few years ago and the fallout, which we're still paying the price of, some of those crazy decisions. So the cost of living has gone up, and it's unlikely to go south. So I think it's only fair that we reflect that, because the taxi trade is an important part of Medway's transport offer. Increasingly important at this time of year, at a time when, through other council channels, communications channels, we are promoting our campaigns on drink driving and encouraging people to leave the car at home on their Christmas lunches and not to take a chance, not to take a chance with people's safety, not to take a chance with their own safety, and not to risk losing their licence, and to use a licensed taxi. I also want to pay tribute to the forbearance of our taxi trade, who are still enduring a failure to properly act by TfL on the issue of non-Medway licensed Uber drivers who are intruding on our borough and behaving with a certain degree of impunity. Well, again, we're going to use that phrase again. Medway taxi drivers follow the rules. Those are rules that we get to set, that they have some input in terms of setting the tone of as well. So it's not a one-way street. But that's not a privilege that we have for those non-Medway licensed Uber taxis. I would reiterate and take this opportunity to do so, as we hopefully agree the new Christmas and New Year tariffs, that people should reflect on their usage of non-Medway licensed Ubers, just how safe that makes them when you are dealing with a driver who is not answerable to this local authority. That you can make a complaint and I can do precisely nothing about it, and nor can our licensing committee. And I think that's a really dangerous way to do business, and I would call on those drivers to come to the table and apply for a Medway licence. It's perfectly within their gift to do so. If they want to operate a taxi, a hackney carriage, or a private hire service in Medway, you can apply for a licence in Medway. That's the right thing to do. That's what this policy is, setting out the fair rules and remuneration for our drivers. And we welcome any comments from members.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. Any colleagues? No? Before I come back to you to formally close the item, I would absolutely agree with you around the work of the MLTDA. It's a good, healthy relationship. Again, we can disagree agreeably on some things, and I think that certainly has been the case, but absolutely, Nigel and the team do a great job being the voice for hundreds of drivers. And again, you highlighted the point around some of the work that's happened here. I want to recognise the role that taxis can play when particularly we are ensuring that our licensed venues are looking at the Ask for Angela scheme, which I know you've taken a personal interest in, and working with good operators to say, actually, make sure all staff are aware of what this is. Safety in our community is paramount. So absolutely support this. I support the fact of not needing to have a meeting on the 22nd of December, although I think we've got one not far away from there. And this puts those things into a helpful and healthy approach, which again, thinking about post-local government reorganisation, that is something which I think could be helpful. I'm going to briefly take Luella, and then I'll come back to you, Alex.
Sorry, I missed my chance before you there, Vince. It was just to highlight that looking at the tariffs on there, and an example of a 2-mile fare in August, actually Medway, and I support the Medway taxi drivers completely, were the cheapest in North Kent, in our region. So any changes, they're still offering a really good service. That's all I wanted to highlight.
I wasn't going to highlight that. I was in another bit of Kent, and the flag rate was 50% higher than it is in Medway. But now you've tempted me to do that, and now I have. Back to you, Alex, to reflect on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go into specific details on the recommendations, but I think it is worth just highlighting in terms of the sort of benchmarked 2-mile journey that Luella is mentioning, that this proposed alteration would make a difference of 40 pence on that journey. So from £8 to £8.40. And bearing in mind that these reviews only take place every 2 years, we have inflation running at around 3% and a lot higher under brief Prime Minister Liz Truss. So, you know, there is a lot of catching up to do for those drivers, and I don't think that that is unreasonable remuneration. And, you know, Vinci mentioned the Ask Angela campaign. I would also, just on a personal note, as the father of 2 young people in their 20s who will probably go out at stupid o'clock this new year just to avoid spending time with Dad on Hogmanay and his kilt, that I hope that they will, when they come home, they're certainly not going to be asking me for a lift, because I'm afraid the answer is no, and they'll be paying these rates. But I really would strongly encourage all parents in Medway to just reinforce that message. Do not use a non-Medway licensed hackney carriage or private hire. These are people who we can account for. They're accountable to us. We know the safety of their vehicle. We check their vehicle every year. We conduct all relevant checks on the individuals themselves. The safe way to get home this Christmas and New Year is using a Medway licensed hackney carriage or private hire vehicle. And I would just ask colleagues approve the recommendations at section 5.
Thank you very much, Alex. I won't wish everyone Happy New Year. We've got at least 3 more days, I think, before we get to that point. Are colleagues happy to agree to recommendations? Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's meeting, and thanks to everybody who's been in attendance here and watching online. Have a good night.